Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Good to see you all here. It felt like a week where we really needed our Sangha. And it's been interesting to watch the numbers on the participants, because normally we start off quite high on Monday, and then Tuesday is kind of the same, and then starts dropping Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday is like maybe half of what Monday was often. But this week the numbers have really stayed steady. Like they've just differed by a few, 1 or 2 or 3 people. So yeah, it feels like we've really been holding the space together during this time when there's just so much to feel and so much to get reactive about. So thank you for your practice. And thank you so much to Miles for showing up for us this week and holding space with such courage and just compassion and wisdom, and just demonstrating the Dharma for all of us. So I'm very appreciative to you, Miles, and to the Sangha. And yeah, it's really good to share the space with you this week. And just a final reminder that if you are able to offer dana, as you know, all of these sessions and Miles's time as well is based on the Buddhist principle of mutual generosity. So that means that Miles doesn't receive a payment from us. He comes in good faith. We offer the sessions in good faith that we will be supported by the community. And of course, that it's not always possible to support financially, depending on what's going on in your life. Sometimes just not possible, and you're welcome to be here. And when you are able, when you're financially in a situation financially where you are able to offer, we really appreciate your support. So today is the last day to offer dana, so that it also gets shared with Miles for his teaching this week. So to do that, it's sangha.live/donate, and I will place a link in the chat. And yeah, there are many more practice opportunities. We've got a day of practice with Ula Koenig on Saturday, Sunday Sangha, next week daily meditations with Martin. So I'm sure we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone, and thank you, Miles.
And thank you, Faith, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 5 of these daily meditations with Sangha Live. And this week we have been exploring the territory of meditation in a time of crisis. And today the topic is going to be on the Aikido Koan, and I'll explain a bit more of that. I'll explain that a bit more later, but I am in addition to being a meditation teacher, I'm also an Aikido teacher, and I started Aikido back in the day in America, and I lived in Japan for 8 years, kind of deeply immersing, and that was really, those years were before my intensive meditation practice, which was in Burma and Nepal mostly. And Aikido is a martial art. There are many martial arts. It's a beautiful martial art. There are many beautiful martial arts. But Aikido is also a unique martial art. It is an exception in the world of martial arts in the sense that it is 100% based on the principles of positive sum. 100%. This is kind of a universal principle. And if it's a universal principle, that means that it's applicable here right now in Sangha Live with this group of people. Wonderful. It's applicable at home. It's applicable in the boardroom. It's applicable in the bedroom. It's applicable in amongst your friends. It's applicable amongst your enemies. It's a 100% universal principle. And this principle is a positive sum principle. What does that mean? If we just stick with martial arts for a moment, because they are a model of conflict. Yeah, they are a model of fighting. They're a model of war. Now, of course, our Dharma practice is hoping to show another way. But in these models, in these martial arts, they are all zero sum. in most of our conflicts, if you just relate for a moment to every little kind of interpersonal conflict you have in your life, generally speaking, of course, I'm not making assumptions about you, but generally speaking, they're going to be zero sum. That means everything in our biological conditioning, hundreds of thousand years of human evolutionary conditioning has conditioned us in a conflict to survive. And it doesn't matter if we're fighting over a saber tooth or a woolly mammoth or a piece of land or who's going to do the dishes tonight, whatever. We are biologically conditioned to survive. And because of that biological conditioning, we tend to see zero sum. And zero sum means that one side is going to win the conflict and the other side's going to lose the conflict. That's just how it is. If you and I ever win, wow, it kind of feels good to win, I'm satisfied, but it's based on another person's dissatisfaction. And then when we see that, we realize that there's a flaw to this model. Oh my God, my satisfaction is based on another person's dissatisfaction. And there are many beautiful models in conflict resolution. I'm also a conflict resolution teacher. And in fact, I even worked with I had a nonprofit called Aikido Without Borders, where I was teaching Aikido in the West Bank, where I was developing Aikido programs with my Palestinian students. And occasionally we would come together with Israelis and other internationals and just practice the art of Aikido. And within the conflict resolution, like things like nonviolent communication, and then within the conflict resolution realm, the orientation is always positive sum. Positive sum means that nobody's winning at the cost of another person. Nobody's winning at the expense of our satisfaction for being right is not resting on another person's satisfaction for losing, but rather both enter and fully hold their truth. Bring those together in a container that can hold that impossible tension when one perspective and another perspective tries to occupy the same space at the same time. Oh my God, that creates a lot of tension. You can just see how it breaks down to zero sum all the time. Don't worry, this is related to our Dharma practice. Just give me one more moment to kind of lay this out. What are the conditions that are necessary for that to evolve in a healing move towards greater wholeness? Whatever the conditions are, the fundamental condition for that type of positive sum intervention, the fundamental condition for successfully moving from zero sum conflicts or crisis towards positive sum outcomes, moving towards wholeness and healing, that successful move, that successful move is 100% dependent on our interiors. What's going on inside of you? What's going on inside of me? What's going on inside of your mind? What's going on inside of my mind? What's going on inside of our hearts? And what is going on inside of our nervous systems? In that sense, when two perspectives come together and try to occupy the same place at the same time, and that tension arises, we have to have a positive relationship towards that tension. And this is where our meditation practice serves us beautifully, because we set ourselves up we set ourselves up with mindfulness to be open and in radical acceptance of whatever's arising in the course of our practice. Sometimes that will be very pleasant. Sometimes it will be mind-blowingly peak experiences. Other times it's going to be really hard. We're all meditators here. We know how tough it can be. Seeing the mind. Oh my God, again. The mind has a mind of its own. I have no control. but we set ourselves up to allow that, to accept that, yes, that is the human condition. And it's that attitude of being present with mindfulness, not too detached, not too involved, but differentiating the awareness, being with experience, that actually creates the transformational process. In Europe, I guess most of the people here are joining from Europe today. Forgive me if I get this a little bit wrong, but the four main rivers, there's the Rhine River, I guess it goes to the North Sea, if I'm not mistaken, the Rhone, which goes into the Mediterranean, the Po, which goes into the Adriatic, and the Danube, which goes into the Black Sea. These are the four big rivers in Europe. And downstream of these rivers, the flora is radically different in each one of these rivers. The fauna is radically different in each one of these rivers. The cities, the cultures, the industry, the countryside, the urban setting, it's all different in each one of these rivers downstream. In fact, we could have wars, probably have had wars, based on the differences that we find in the areas of these rivers downstream. But we have to understand that each one of these four main rivers has a source somewhere up in the Alps, in Switzerland, and they all come from the same source. Having downstream experiences, having downstream skills, having downstream expertise, having downstream identifications, it's all good and normal. But that's where the world of differences exists, and that's a good thing. But upstream at the source, up in the Alps, you can even go there. I've never been there, but I've been close to it. I've had friends who've been there. You can go, and it's the same source. It's one source, and it's pure liquid that emerges from, I guess, either from a glacier or a spring or something. I don't know what's going on up there, but it's one source. So all of our Dharma practice, and this is so important, all of our Dharma practice is taking us upstream to the source. And in the course of that Dharma practice, we will get caught by downstream concerns, by downstream perspectives, by downstream beliefs, by downstream truths. Maybe even go to war because of those downstream truths. But whatever differences we have there, arguments, conflicts, crisis, wars, they're all going to be zero sum. Zero sum. Zero sum. Whatever resolution or solution that comes out of those downstream conflicts is going to be zero sum. It means that it's going to be based on the dissatisfaction or the loss of another person or another people. Whew. That's kind of the human history. And yet, if we can go to the source, if we can get to the source, it's the only place where there's a hope for positive sum resolutions, positive sum where everything downstream gets nourished and nurtured and fed from the source. So as I was saying before, that Aikido is and this is the Koan part. We're going to take this into our meditation today. Aikido is a positive sum martial art. It means whatever the conflict is, we enter it with this kind of feeling of being centered within ourselves, showing up, connecting with the conflict, and then staying open for the emergent harmonization. Those difficult energies come together and emerge towards, I should say, healing and wholeness. And doing Aikido could take you years to practice and even kind of get it. It's easy to get a taste of these, but to master them, it takes years of practice. But the Aikido Koan is something that all of us can do at all times, in all places, and through every circumstance. This little practice I'm offering right now is something, if we remember, just like mindfulness is helpful in all things, the Aikido Koan can be done at all times, in all places, and through all circumstances. And it's very simple. In the midst of conflict, in the face of conflict, when all the bells and whistles are telling us to fight it, or to run away for it, or to kind of bury our heads in the sand. To win, not lose. In the face of conflict or a crisis, remember this koan. There's 4 lines, and each one of them is an inquiry. Number 1, I am not passive. And you can do this in your meditation too. In the face of conflict, we are not passive. Passive disengages. Yeah, sure, I can be passive. Crazy. But I remind myself I am not passive. I negate that egoic move. Line number 2, I'm not aggressive. I can definitely be aggressive in conflict, but no, I remind myself I am not aggressive. I negate that and I drop back into the moment. Line number 3, I am not passive aggressive. It's another move in conflict. It's a very powerful move in conflict. You know, we kind of pull the levers of power without everybody realizing it. Okay, it's normal. It's human nature. I am not passive aggressive. So that tendency in me to kind of pull the passive aggressive strings is negated, and I'm just there, present. So these are the first 3 moves before the last one. I'm not passive. Let it in. I'm not aggressive. Let it in. I'm not passive aggressive. Breathe deep. Then the koan, who am I? Who am I? Resting in the koan, being with the crisis, being with the conflict, being with the stress in that moment. I'm not passive. I'm not aggressive. I'm not passive aggressive. Who am I? Opens up the space for mindfulness, presence, being with, and then whatever emerges from that is the truth. It's the source. It's not downstream concerns. It's the source. Whatever emerges from me being passive is downstream. Whatever emerges from me being aggressive is downstream, zero sum, zero sum. Whatever emerges from me being passive aggressive is downstream, zero sum. Whatever emerges from me not saying who am I, but I am this, is downstream, zero sum. Negate the self. I'm not passive. I'm not aggressive. I'm not passive aggressive. Who am I? We negate the self, then we negate the negation, and whatever emerges is going to be moving towards wholeness and healing. So let's sit. Finding a comfortable position. Bring your mindfulness to the body. And notice the normal, perfectly normal tendencies of the mind. These downstream tendencies to fix the body, to adjust it, to make it more comfortable, to manipulate it, to regulate it. Although I must say regulating is good and important at times, but in our mindfulness meditation, the basic is that we don't regulate unless you feel you have to. So just let it be. So if it's uncomfortable, I'm not going to be passive or passive aggressive with that. I'm going to open and allow. And shifting your attention to your mind and noticing the tendency or the conditions, the quality of your mental state right now. Are you still with the Aikido Koan? Are you trying to figure it out? Is the mind busy? Is there monologues, internal monologues? Is there internal dialogues? Is there internal trilogues? Is there internal, cacophony? All normal. Just know that you can subtly and skillfully differentiate your awareness in that space of being and be with whatever's arising in the mind. No preference. no manipulation. And should the tendency to manipulate, or should judgment or ideas about how the mind should be and should not be, should these arise, it's also normal in the course of our practice. Be mindful, know the qualities and characteristics, and as you observe, notice what's happening. That's the emergence. That's the first universal characteristic of anicca, impermanence. And shifting your attention to the breath, knowing the precise, subtle physical sensations that you experience on the in-breath, noticing those sensations on the out-breath, noticing the quality and characteristics that emerge as you sustain your mindfulness with the movement of the in-breath and the movement of the out-breath. Being and being with, not in a passive way, not in an aggressive way, not in a passive-aggressive way. And if you like to drop in the inquiry, who am I? Turning the question on itself. Being and being with your experience. With each breath, in each moment by moment, breath by breath. And bringing your mindfulness back to the body. Feel the body. Bringing your mindfulness to the mind and know your mental state. Bring your mindfulness to the breath. Feel the breath. And before we finish the meditation, let us reflect one more time on the Aikido Koan. I am not passive. I am not aggressive. And I am not passive aggressive. Who am I? Feel the space on the inside. And as you slowly open your eyes, coming out of the meditation, feel the space on the outside. Okay. So, if anybody has any questions for the next, we have about 12 minutes, 13 minutes, something like that. I'd be happy to answer them. And while we're waiting for questions, just let us reflect on the truth that Hegel dropped. He said that the divine is merely the emerging dialectic. The divine, we could also say the Dharma, is nothing less than the emerging dialectic. Two perspectives in a dialectic. That which emerges is always going to be a greater truth, a fuller truth, a more whole truth, a positive sum perspective. And even though it's impossible to hold that dialectic, our Dharma practice gives us two very powerful weapons if we're spiritual warriors, tools to work with that impossible dialectic. Number one, it gives us the capacity to hold that uncomfortable tension, because we're doing it every time we sit down and meditate. And number two, it helps us develop the competencies of how to skillfully work with those dialectics. Victoria has a question. Hi, Victoria. When the answer came that I am a being flowing ever on from the source, why do I feel so different from the other flowing rivers that come from that source? Yeah, at first it's beautiful. I love that. I'm assuming that when you did the koan, that the answer that emerged from that dialectic was that I am being flowing ever on from the source. And then your question is, why do I feel so different from other flowing rivers from that source? Because there are two truths. Truth number one is the absolute truth, the source. We are all being. We are all the source. Truth number two is the relative truth. That's what it means to be a human being. Victoria, I feel completely united with you in your question here. I am being flowing ever. I am a being ever flowing ever from the source. I'm one with you there on a good day, hopefully in this moment. And then your question, yeah, we're just different people. Of course. That is how it's supposed to be. That is also a dialectic when we have the absolute and the relative trying to occupy the same place at the same time. It creates a tension. Oh my God. This is our Dharma practice. And that tension is evolutionary tension that will, when the conditions are right, that will evolve towards a greater perspective. There's no more questions here. If anybody has a question, it's a good sign when there's no questions. That means that we're all kind of resting in this somewhere closer to source. I don't know if Pri is still around. A few days ago, Pri joined me up on the stage for like a meditation interview. And if she is here today, I'd be interested to hear if you have an update, check-in. So Michelle says, can you speak more about this? I am not passive. I'm not aggressive. I'm not passive aggressive. Who am I? Well, if you just think of a conflict, just think of an interpersonal conflict with somebody. Our tendencies are we all have these ego strategies, all of us. And aggression can be an ego strategy. Passivity can be an ego strategy, kind of survival instinct. Passive aggression is a survival instinct. These are all ego strategies to protect and survive. God bless us all. When we negate my tendency to be passive, that means I've got to be here. Okay. When we negate my tendency to be aggressive, that means, that means I've got to be here. And not passive, but just here. When we negate my tendency to kind of, like somehow sneak in and be passive aggressive, when I negate that, that means that I have to be here, back in that uncomfortable center, connected with that uncomfortable conflict. Then the question, who am I, negates all of my egoic tendencies. And if I'm fully present and fully connected in the midst of that conflict where those two perspectives are trying to occupy the same space at the same time, then what'll happen is that uncomfortable tension, at the center of that tension is a still point. Out of that still point is radiating energy. The direction of that energy, it wants to go somewhere. It might not be where I want it to go, passively aggressively or passive aggressively. It might not be where you want it to go, but that energy wants to go somewhere. If, through the grace of God, we allow it to go, it's going to lead towards healing and wholeness. So I hope that helps. Catherine has a question. Catherine Thompson. A general issue for me is being able to acknowledge and stay with my own feelings of aggression, passive aggression, and passivity. Yes. Saying I am not almost seems to deny the experiences. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's something we don't. That's also kind of a passive thing, denying experiences. So it's a great subtlety that you're bringing up here. Also, the I am seem to reinforce myself as a self. Okay. Any comments? Yeah. So negating our passivity or our aggression or our passive aggression could actually be another aggressive move or passive. It could all be that. We live in kind of a house of mirrors, But the more we become subtle to that, it's really just a letting go. It's a releasing. Grasping and clinging is the nature of our mind. It's a releasing of these grasping and clinging tendencies, which is really kind of the source of Dharma practice. Little bit downstream of that, it's very helpful to know what my ego strategies are: aggression, passive aggression, or passivity. And that will change from condition to condition, situation to situation. It will even change from person to person, probably. But knowing those tendencies, kind of like knowing personality type, your personality, that's very, very good stuff to know. It's helpful. But ultimately, the who am I helps us to release all of our egoic grasping and clinging and be in the present moment. And what I'm saying is that from that present moment, it's not always a pleasant moment, from that present moment, when we are still present with the uncomfortable other, that creates a tension. And whatever rises out of that tension, emerges from that tension, will be positive sum. So I hope that's helpful. We have just a couple of more minutes. Yeah. Okay, Los. Some kind of answers, not on words, more like a hunch of experiencing, beautiful, came up, and they felt more like an answer to what am I instead of who am I. Cool. Got a bit confused by the word who. Not a problem. Semantics. Yeah. Often an emerging experience we won't be able to articulate it, but is a clear experience. We're having it. With the continued resting in that experience, then it could very well just be resting in silence where words don't touch. But then we also can, expression can also emerge from that experience. And that's a little bit downstream, how you express it, how I express it, how another person expresses it. Catherine or not. Yeah, somebody else. Yeah, Catherine, I think, or somebody. I'm sorry. It's all downstream, and it's all good because it's an expression of the source. That's the beauty of diversity. The last one. Rivka asks, is assertiveness the middle way between passivity and aggression? Well, assertiveness, we could say that assertiveness is kind of aggression, but maybe not too hard aggression. And assertiveness, there may be times to be aggressive. I have to say that. It's fact. There may be times to be a passive in life. There may be times to even be passive aggressive. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. We just have to understand that it's zero sum. Putting a hard boundary. Imagine somebody's kind of a relationship in your life that's a bit toxic, and you're starting to understand it, and for whatever reason it's toxic, and you need to get some space, so you put a hard boundary. That would be assertiveness. That could be the right healthy thing to do. Ultimately, we want to be able to be open and free. We want to be free behind our boundaries. We want to be free in front of our boundaries, and the boundaries, like a contact lens, they should be eventually, as our practice matures, our ego boundaries become permeable. So the boundaries there, yeah, I'm still this person with these history and boundaries and who I am, but my consciousness can expand beyond. My consciousness can come back in. The boundaries can dissolve. The boundaries can come up, whatever the case. That would be on the practice of wisdom. Okay, so I hope that was helpful for everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining me in this week of practice. I definitely want to thank Sangha Live, Faith. Thank you so much. And of course to Martin. I believe Martin is going to be leading the sessions next week. So definitely come to those. And Martin and I have had quite a few talks this week about what's going on. So it's been wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for being in this space with me, especially at this time. And if anybody's interested in following me, you can find me on Instagram. I usually put up excuse me, Dharma content there, and also on Facebook. And my blog is over at theintegraldojo.com. I guess I like to finish with wishing that we all are able to, as my teacher Pandita said, practice meditation as if it's in a time of crisis, as if we are digging a well in the middle of a forest fire. And may our Dharma practice take us deeper, help us create capacity for being with stress and conflict and crisis, help us to learn competencies for managing, dealing, working with, resolving those conflicts and crisis. And may that lead us upstream towards the source. And may that arise from your meditation and lead you forward, forever and always forward on your path of practice. Thank you, everybody.